My name is Jake, welcome to the channel. In today's video, I want to talk about how to invest in a 401k for the long term, especially if you're trying to retire early from your dividend portfolio. How does a 401k fit into your overall portfolio and your strategy? And really, I want to focus on my own experience, and hopefully you can take from my experience and learn something from it. And I think there's a lot of you, especially if you're trying to reach early retirement and you want to live off of your dividend portfolio, I want to talk to you. This is me having a conversation with you, because the reason why this is so important is when I was first learning about investing, I was gathering information from every different source that I could. The very first finance book that I read, for better or for worse, was The Total Money Makeover from Dave Ramsey. And there was a lot of great stuff in there. There was a lot of things that I learned and I agreed with, and a lot of things that I disagreed with. He would always talk about investing in the best growth mutual funds. And I kept asking the question over and over again, well, which ones? Tell me, Dave, just tell me which ones. And he never would tell me what to invest in. And I don't know if there's an alternative motive or what, but that really left me more confused than anything. And like I said, this left me with more questions than answers. And especially when you're new to investing and you're being told to do something, but you don't really know what that is and don't understand it. It's like when you invest into a high growth mutual fund, like Uncle Dave said, but you don't know what to expect. And it could look a little like this.
Okay, yeah, just put your hand through, yep. Yep, a little lower, yeah. Keep going, yep.
Ew, what is this?
Yep, just go all the way through.
Oh my god!
Yeah, just keep
What
going.
is that?
Keep going.
Okay.
Okay, cool, now take your hand out slowly.
Okay.
Yep, just nice and slow.
Ooh.
Nice and slow, there you go.
Adam, what the heck?
Yeah, all right.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. All right, cool. So let's take a look. I want to cover like three main topics. First, I want to talk about, the different options that you have when you invest into a 401k. I want to talk about the differences between a 401k, a Roth 401k, and then the bulk of the video, I want to talk about my own personal experience, and I want to share with you how I did it. And I didn't have all the answers, but I'm going to show you and tell you what I did, and it may be applicable, it may help you. So when you think about portfolio allocation models, this is a very nerdy topic. Essentially what it is, it's analyzing different asset classes and what your expected returns will be. So when you get a 401k from your employer, hopefully they have a match, hopefully, you're going to have different options. You're going to be able to invest into index funds with stocks, also known as equities. You're also going to have the option to invest into bonds, and then also, for example, target date funds, which are a mixture of bonds and, equities and stocks. And each of these assets have a different expected return, a total return, and the dividend is part of that return. And so if you were just to invest into bonds, you could reasonably assume, this is historical data, it's never guaranteed, in the future, right? So historical data, if you just invested in bonds, you could reasonably assume a 6% rate of return over an extended period of time. If you invested in a 50-50 portfolio, you could reasonably assume a 9% annual rate of return. And then lastly, if you were to invest just into equities, just into stocks, you could reasonably assume about a 12% annual rate of return. Now, I obviously take these numbers with a grain of salt because there's going to be a lot of fluctuation in the short term. But in the long term, over the last 100 years, this is historically what the market has averaged. Now, let's take just a moment and let's understand the differences between a 401k and a Roth 401k. This confused me a little bit, and there was some nuance here that I didn't understand until I actually was surprised with an unforeseen tax bill. So let me walk through this really, really quick. Don't confuse this with a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA. Those are completely separate. Your 401k and your Roth 401k are from your employer, or if you're self-employed. A traditional 401k, you get the tax benefit up front, but you get zero tax benefits when you take out the money when you retire. That's what you see here on the top. Here on the second to the top, you'll see the Roth 401k. With a Roth 401k, you get zero tax benefits up front, but you get the tax benefits on the back end. Now, what you can do is you can always do a conversion or a rollover. So if you invested into a traditional 401k, you can always convert that account into a Roth IRA, for example. And that is something that I did, was one of the best things that I ever did, because then I could take all the money and invest it into funds that I wanted. And I could also avoid what's called RMDs, required minimum distributions, for example. And if you don't know what that is, that's something that will come if you're investing into a 401k. It's important to understand that how you view this, whether you invest into a 401k or a Roth 401k, there's no right or wrong answer. However, I would argue if you're early in your career, you're only making maybe $50,000 or $60,000, it's probably better to invest into a Roth IRA because you don't need the tax savings now. On the other hand, if you are in a high tax bracket and you're making a lot of money, I would argue that it probably makes more sense to invest into a traditional or a regular 401k, because you could always convert that 401k into a Roth IRA later. If, for example, when you retire and you're in a lower tax bracket, you can lower and you kind of manipulate when you pay taxes. So there's a lot of advantages, a lot of strategy that can go into that. And there's other things like the Roth IRA conversion ladder that I'm not going to get into, but there's so many different tools that you can use that are legal in the tax code that you can take advantage of. And just to give you an example, early in my career, I maxed out my Roth IRA and my Roth 401k. And then once I started getting up, making more money in a higher tax bracket, I personally switched and started only investing into a traditional 401k, traditional IRA, with the intention of when I stopped working, I was going to convert them. And spoiler, this year I stopped working. Like many of you know my story. I hope you do if you've been watching my videos. I was laid off from my job this year. So our income was not as high. And so I converted all of my retirement accounts into my Roth IRA. It's just an amazing thing. It was a huge day for me when I converted that. I was like, tax-free. I paid the taxes, and from now on, going forward in retirement, I will never pay another cent in taxes in these retirement accounts. But one thing that I do want to say, if you want to make sure that you plan this accordingly, because as an example, I did this a few years back when I changed jobs during the pandemic. I converted my 401k into my Roth IRA, but I didn't understand and realize that I also had employer contributions. And those employer contributions, even though I invested into a Roth 401k, my employer's contributions were actually just a 401k, right? And so when I converted it, it was, I actually ended up when I rolled over my Roth 401k, there was actually a conversion as well from my employer's contributions, and I had to pay taxes on my employer's contributions in the year that I rolled it over. So something to be very, very aware of. When I saw that, I got my tax bill. I was like, huh? What? what is this? And, that happened. So knowledge is power. Make sure that you understand that before you do a conversion. Read up on it, research it. YouTube is a great asset, great tool to educate yourself when it comes to this kind of stuff. So now I want to talk about how I invested in my 401k. So now I want to be very clear, very honest, that when I first started working, I was a complete noob. I had all of this knowledge from, the gurus to invest into growth, value, international, and you need this perfect mix. And I had, a portion invested into small cap, mid cap, large cap. And the mistake was, and this was unique to me, it may not be the case for you, because I changed jobs so frequent, I was constantly having to roll over my old employer's 401k into my Roth IRA. And because I was investing into some of these, international or small caps, which are maybe a little bit more volatile, I actually was rolling over a smaller balance than what I contributed because I was investing into these, volatile index funds. It just was a mess. And what I learned was that I didn't really need all that complexity. Maybe you want it. That's fine. If it makes you feel good, go for it. But for me, I learned that I didn't need exposure in international small cap, target date funds, mid caps. What I learned was the simple path to wealth, guys. It's just keep it simple. A couple of years into working, I realized, you know what, especially if I'm going to be changing jobs every couple of years, I'm going to keep it simple and I'm just going to invest into the S&P 500, assuming, that I had the option to invest in the S&P 500. I didn't always have the option. Some of my employers were great. Some of them were, it was absolutely garbage. Some of the plans that I had access to. Thankfully, I didn't work at a lot of those companies for very long. Most of my employers had great plans. And what makes one of these funds crap is, for example, the expense ratio. If you go and you see some of these the funds that have over a 1% expense ratio, the ones here on your screen, these ones are actually really good. But some of those plans, they had a 2% expense ratio. And it's just absolutely horrible, right? It's just, highway robbery. It's really, really important. That's something that I absolutely learned. And this was for me, that my my 401k, whether it be a traditional or Roth 401k, I just kept it simple across the board. I simplified it for my wife and for me, and we invested 100% just into the S&P 500 or something similar. If I had access to the total US stock market, like VTI as an example, I would have done 100% into VTI, and I would have totally skipped over the international, the target date funds, the mid cap, and try to not be cute and see if I can get all this perfect mix because somebody on the internet or Uncle Dave told me to do so. I found for me, it was just easier to keep it simple. Now, I just want to visualize this for you really briefly and show you what this can kind of look like if you're investing in whether it be a total, bond fund where you're 100% into bonds, 100% into the stock market, or if you're at a 50-50. Now, the data here that I'm going to show you goes back from January 2008. So this is right, in the heat of the financial crisis. So take this with a grain of salt, but it's important to see kind of realistically what you can expect. And so let's take a look at these three portfolios here. If we back test them in Portfolio Visualizer. So Portfolio 1 is 100% in bonds, Portfolio 2 is 100% in stocks, and Portfolio 3 is a balanced 50-50 portfolio. If we scroll in and take a look at this, you can see that the compounding annual growth rate since 2008, this is including the dividend, in just the bond portfolio, you're getting under 2.5%. Portfolio 2 with just 100% stocks, you're getting over 9%. And a 50-50 portfolio, you're getting over 6%. And if you look at the growth of the portfolios, you can see here that you're in, historically, if you're looking for growth, especially if you're younger, it would be advantageous to skew heavier towards growth, more of a stock or equity type portfolio, and maybe the bonds maybe at a lower percentage, if at all. So that's my opinion. But what my wife and I did, we went 100% equities in our retirement accounts. Now, lastly, I want to share a personal story, and I want to share with you how I did this, how I invested in my 401k. The way that we set up our investments is when we first started working, we over-invested, like we maxed out our retirement accounts, our Roth IRA, our HSA, and our 401ks. We maxed those out. And we did that because we didn't really know what else to do. So we thought, okay, well, we don't know what else to do. We're just going to max out our retirement accounts. That was one of the best things that we could have ever done. It wouldn't have been the only way to do this, but I'm very, very grateful that we did, because then once we found the FIRE movement, I dialed back our investments into our tax advantage accounts like a 401k, and we focused more on our taxable accounts because our goals had changed. And then once our priorities and our plans changed, that we wanted to focus on financial independence and retire early, much earlier in the age of 59, we then started investing more in our taxable account. So then we stopped investing except for the employer match into our 401k, and we invested heavily into our taxable account. But the implication here is just mind-blowing, because had we not invested into our retirement accounts, we wouldn't be able to do what I'm going to show you here next. Now, my wife and I, once we reached FIRE, we will no longer invest another penny into our retirement accounts except for our HSA. We will invest into our HSA because we will have a marketplace healthcare plan that's unique to the US, right? So if you're not sure what that is, you can watch videos that I made on that in the channel, but we will still continue to invest into an HSA, but we will no longer invest into a 401k or a Roth IRA. And the portfolio balance here that you see on your screen, this is the portfolio balance that my wife and I have today. We are 37 years old, and we didn't always max out these accounts. I'm not showing this to brag by any means. I'm showing you that your average person can do this. Now, at the age of 37, we've worked our entire careers up until this point, and we have this money sitting in our retirement accounts. The majority of it, the bulk of it, is in my Roth IRA, my wife's Roth IRA, and once my wife finally quits her job, we will roll over her 401k into her Roth IRA. But the balance that we have in our retirement accounts is $250,000. We plan on not investing a single penny into these accounts going forward. So no more into the Roth IRA, 401k. The HSA, we look at that separate because we look at that as our medical bills as we plan for our retirement. But assuming that we will contribute no more money to these accounts effectively are coasting in the background. Have you ever heard of that term, coast fire? This money that we have in our retirement account is coasting, and it is sitting there in the background in 100% index funds, at low fee index funds like VGT, VTI. And I've made an entire video on my Roth IRA. So if you don't know what I invest in my Roth IRA, at the end of this video, I will have a video pop up and you can watch how I invest into my Roth IRA. You can check that video next. But what I want to show you is, because our portfolio is 100% into equities or stocks, remember we learned at the beginning of the video, the expected annual returns. Now, I'm going to be really conservative and say that we get an 8% return over the next 23 years. Okay, this is once we turn the age of 60. I'm 37 right now. If we do nothing, invest in not a single penny for the next 23 years, we could reasonably assume around a $1.5 million balance. And you'll notice on this chart here, what's in blue is what we invested. That won't change. But the growth of the portfolio, and this is not linear. You're going to have years where it goes down and years where it goes up. But over the long term, this is the expected annual return. Now let's assume that the market is really, really bullish and it goes up even more. Let's say it goes up 9%. That 1% has a massive impact on the total return over that extended period of time. Now, let's say, for example, the market's doing really well and it goes up to 10%. If it goes up to 10%, we're just shy of $2.5 million, and we didn't invest a single penny since the age of 37. And now let's say it goes up to the 12% like we learned in the beginning of the video. I'm not saying that it will do this, but let's say it did. If it went up 12% a year for the next 23 years, we'd have just under $4 million in our portfolio, and we didn't invest a single penny. The power here is in compound interest. If you understand the power of compound interest, this is what builds wealth. It's not by working and working your way to the top and working an extra hour and then spending that money on discretionary items. It's about leveraging assets that compound and grow. And when you're comparing the different options that you have, bonds versus stocks versus target date funds, which are a mixture of both, if you're investing for growth over the longer period of time, you're going to have to stomach more volatility. But this is the power of compound interest. And for my own sake and my own sanity, I'm kind of planning more, let's just be really conservative. I'm planning more for this. This is kind of what I'm projecting in, when we turn 60, what will the portfolio balance roughly be? This is kind of what I'm thinking about. Now, this money is sitting in the background, but we're still living off of our dividend income from our portfolio. And the way that we view our retirement accounts is not to live off of the dividend per se from these investments, but rather for the growth. So we take two different approaches to our accounts. We have a holistic approach to how we view all of our retirement accounts. Our taxable accounts, like an M1 that I share on my channel, that's purely to generate cash flow to live off of the dividend. My investments in my retirement accounts are purely for growth. I am kind of a boglehead in the sense of with my retirement accounts. I just invest in index funds. I'm more on the boglehead side of things. And once I reach, the age of 60, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where we're going to be at, but I have complete flexibility. And that is how I view how someone like myself who's retiring early but planning for the future, that is how I view all of these accounts. And all of these accounts holistically help in our pursuit of retiring early and being financially independent. Now, I know that this is not going to be feasible for everyone. I'm sharing this with you hopefully to motivate you and to hopefully help you think in a different way, that it's okay to be different and to think different. What I struggled with when I first was mapping this all out, I thought that I was doing something wrong because it went against conventional thinking. Conventional thinking in America is you work until you're 65 and you max out your retirement accounts, and that's the end of it. This went against conventional thinking, and I really struggled in the beginning because I thought I was doing something wrong. But then I learned that, you know what? It's okay to be different. It's okay to have different goals, and that's why I'm sharing this with you. So I hope that you got value from this video, whether you are in the same situation as my wife and I or in a different situation. I hope this helped open your eyes to a new way of thinking that there's not a one size fits all. You can be different and it can still work out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see everybody in next week's video.
Please subscribe. Please subscribe.
You know what? I think we're gonna be friends. Can everyone say hi to my friend? That's crazy. I just wanted to say thanks. I'm glad you came along, partner.